So with the big Stefan Molyneux and Brett Weinstein Twitter spat, I thought this was a good clip to bring up about IQ, psychology, and the validity of psychology, and Jordan's stance on IQ and those kinds of metrics. And then I'm going to play another video called Science Must Fall to show you the opposite end of the spectrum and the stuff that Stefan Molyneux and Jordan Peterson, I think, are trying to stand against.
Hi. One of the, a lot of critics have said that, whether it's valid or not, that a lot of your, studies are sort of pseudo-science, and that a lot of it is just a way for you to, a lot of it is informed by your Christian beliefs. I was hoping if you could, talk about that a bit more, or whether it's not true or not, or whether it's...
Well, the pseudoscience issue, that's pretty damn comical, especially given who it's usually, what would you say, brought forth by. And that would be like social constructionist gender studies theorist types. It's like, Jesus, being criticized by that group is like being nibbled to death by ducks from a scientific perspective. You know, it's like, oh, you're criticizing... You're criticizing my science. It's like, well, you don't know anything about science. You don't know anything about biology. It's like, well, all of that's neo-colonialist element of the tyrannical patriarchy. It's like, okay, fine, throw out the social sciences if that's what you want to do. But what I have, and it's not so much what I've done, although I have done research in gender differences in personality as part of my, what would you call it, research output. We developed a questionnaire called the Big Five Aspect Scale, which is being widely used around the world, which provides what seems to be the highest resolution, psychometrically valid model of personality that's available today. There's contenders, but it's certainly up there in the top 2 or 3. And we've mapped personality differences between men and women. Neutrally, it's like we didn't know what the differences were going to be or whether they showed up or not. But these studies that show that there are differences in temperament and interest between men and women, they are, look, you can say what you want about psychology. You can say, well, it's bunk. Psychometrics is bunk. Well, then you're going to sure get rid of sociology and political science and the economics and so forth, because they are way more methodologically weak than psychology. But maybe you're willing to dispense with them too. But of psychological studies, the personality studies are the most psychometrically solid. They are the most reliable and valid and well replicated. And they indicate that there are differences between men and women. They're not huge, although the differences in interest are quite big, but they're certainly large enough to produce quite a bit of difference at the extremes. And the extremes are where the action is in terms of things like occupational choice. So, and you can say, well, that's pseudoscience, and you can say I'm a pseudoscientist, but what that means is that you have to say that about all the social sciences. And if you want to do that, and it's not like people cavil at doing that. I mean, we have critics who say that the entire scientific enterprise is nothing but what neo-colonial outgrowth of the Eurocentric, patriarchal, tyrannical worldview, and it's really been imposed as a way of continuing the oppression narrative or something like that. It's like, fine, if that you can do that. There's a price to be paid for it, and there's usually a performative contradiction involved too, because all the people who purport not to believe in science are still perfectly happy to utilize all the crazy gadgets that the scientists have produced, and so they seem to believe in science well enough to do things like fly in airplanes and use their iPhones, and you know that's actually an indication of their belief in the theories upon which the technologies are predicated, but that sort of internal coherence is too much for the typical postmodernist. And so, and with regards to my pseudoscience status as a psychologist, I'm a perfectly, what would you say? I'm a perfectly credible research psychologist. I'm well cited, my papers are published in good journals, and I've spent 30 years trying to figure out what the most reliable measurements are in psychology. Because I got obsessed with that in the 1990s when I found out that so much of what psychologists were measuring wasn't real, which the psychologists all figured out, by the way, about 4 years ago. And so I went for the core. It's like, what's reliable? What can we measure? We can measure IQ. That doesn't mean that we're happy about it, that's for sure, but we can measure it. What else can we measure? Looks like we can measure personality with something approximating a 5-dimensional structure. I wasn't happy about that. I thought it was a theory that was as dull as dishwater. dishwasher, whatever, either of those. They're all equally dull. It was a theory without romance as far as I was concerned. I'm quite interested in psychoanalytic theories, for example. But the brute power of the statistical processes that produced the models it's undeniable. And it has high predictive validity. I mean, the best predictor of your life outcome, the best psychometric predictor is IQ. The second best is conscientiousness. And they're powerful predictors. They still leave about between 50 to 75% of your life outcome, economically speaking, to random factors that can't be measured, which is a lot, but as far as what we can measure goes, they're very powerful predictors. And so they can wave the pseudoscience flag all they want. It's not going to help. Unless, as I said, you want to throw out the entire edifice. It's like, go ahead. You don't think the social sciences are worth anything? It's like, dispense with them. We're trying to do that anyways. And the radical types are doing the same thing to the STEM fields. They're after them like you cannot believe, especially in the United States. So we don't like the results, therefore the entire enterprise is suspect. Okay, it's not wise. And what the hell's the problem? What, there's no differences between men and women? We're actually going to believe that? So here's a better theory, and this is what's supported by the facts. There are differences in interest and preference between men and women. You eradicate the sociocultural differences by making your society more egalitarian. The biological differences maximize. Okay, what's the problem? Men and women get to choose what they want to do. They don't choose the same things. Is that a problem? What are you going to do? Force them? Because that is what you're going to do. Well, when are you going to start? When they're in like kindergarten? And how are you going to do that? Especially if the differences are large. You're going to do that in a relatively tyrannical way. Yeah, it's about time the damn lobsters showed up. They didn't do that at Oxford. So, I'm serious about this. It's like, let's say you're a feminist, okay? What is it that you want as a feminist? Do you want all women to be the same and all of them to be exactly the same as all men? Or do you want to let the cards fall where they're going to and let people make free choice? It's like, it isn't obvious to me which of those is more commensurate with the ideologically pure and virtuous version of feminism. As far as I'm concerned, there's differences between men and women, in interest, especially in interest, because women tilt towards interest in people and men tilt towards interest in things. And that drives occupational differentiation. And it maximizes in the Scandinavian countries. It's like, well, what are you going to do about that? It's not true. It's like, yeah, sorry, it's true. Well, we don't know what to do about that. Oh, the whole science is suspect. It's like, maybe your damn theory is suspect. I mean, that's a possibility. It might be worth thinking about it before you throw everything else out. What are you going to replace that with? Judith Butler's sociocultural theory? Well, good luck founding your existence on that. So, pseudoscience, Jesus.
So some people might not be familiar with what Jordan was talking about when he was talking about the types who would throw away the whole of the scientific research and so forth and the methods used. So I thought I'd pull up this clip here to show you sort of the opposite end of the spectrum. And, Stefan Molyneux and Brett Weinstein are going back and forth on Twitter about IQ. You can see Jordan's position on it, that there's something to IQ. And so here's some other perspective that's on the opposite end of the spectrum to give you some more perspective on some of what they're fighting against.
Okay, so can I respond to your questions? I wanted to directly respond. I was actually thinking about this kind of thing because I thought that it was going to be one of the kind of questions, how do we even start to decolonize science? Because science is true because it is science, and what can you do? And my response to that was, if I personally were committed to enforcing decolonization, science as a whole is a product of Western modernity, and the whole thing should be scratched off, especially in Africa. So if you want practical solutions to how to decolonize science, we'd have to restart science from, an African perspective, from our perspective of how we've experienced science. For instance, I had a question for all the science people is, there's a place in KZN, and they believe that through the magic, the black magic, you call it black magic, they call it witchcraft, others, that you are able to send a lightning to strike someone. So can you explain that scientifically? Because it is something that happens
I need to address you directly. When we started this, we agreed on certain house rules.
Okay.
And by you doing that, you're disrespecting the sacredness of the space. And so I'd like to ask you to first please apologize to the panel directly. And then number two, understand the rules that we went by in this space. Because it's going to be very problematic. When we started, this is not an antagonizing space. And so what you're trying to do is collapse the space and make it antagonizing, which we will not allow. This is a progressive space for people to say their opinions. And we have noted how those opinions are going to be laid out. So I would like you to first apologize and then go on and agree to abiding by the rules of the space. Otherwise, I would, if you're not willing to do that, I'd please ask you to remove yourself from the space. But those are the rules of engagement of the space.
Okay, I'm very sorry to the panel.
Okay, and you agree to abide by the rules of the space. Thank you. Please carry on.
So I will finish. See, that very response is the reason why I am not in the science faculty. I did science throughout my high school years, and there was a lot of things that I just, but it's fine. But Western modernity is the direct antagonistic factor to decolonization, because Western knowledge is totalizing. It is saying that it was Newton and only Newton who knew or saw an apple falling, and then out of nowhere decided that gravity existed and created an equation, and that is it. For whether people knew Newton or not, or whether whatever happens in Western Africa, Northern Africa, the thing is, the only way to explain gravity is through Newton, who sat under a tree and saw an apple fall. So Western modernity is the problem that decolonization directly deals with, to say that we are going to decolonize by having knowledge that is produced by us, that speaks to us, and that is able to accommodate knowledge from our perspective. So if you're saying that you disagree with her approach, it means that you are vested in the Western and Eurocentric way of understanding, which means you yourself still need to go back internally, decolonize your mind, come back and say, how can I relook at what I've been studying all these years? Because Western knowledge is very pathetic, to say the least. I, from a decolonized perspective, believe we can do more as new knowledge producers, as people who are given the ability to reason, or whatever is that people say we do when we think or rationalize. So decolonizing the science would mean doing away with it entirely and starting all over again to deal with how we respond to the environment and how we understand it. Thank you.
Okay, I have a response to it.
So what was that phrase she said? Western knowledge is pathetic, or Western science is pathetic? Well, it seems to have gotten us very far. Now, Jordan is saying that it could lead into disaster because as our technology has progressed, our wisdom has not. And so there's some basis to use some caution here regarding Western technology, Western science, and where is it going to lead. But to throw the whole thing out seems to be too drastic a step. And this is what Jordan and Stefan Molyneux, I believe, are fighting for, to keep science credible and to not have it fall into something like black magic, voodoo, and witch doctors. That's taking things too far. If you like this sort of thing, please give the video a like and subscribe. Thank you.